Fire away.
So, thank you for their graciousness. I just wanted to ask, and if this is taking you away from where you want to go, it's too personal, just shut me down, that's okay.
Why would I want to do that?
Well, I've watched your DVD, so I understand that you want to keep on purpose.
Yeah.
I had a situation with my eldest daughter where I felt at that time I needed to learn about spirit releasement, because she was attracting, and she's always been very sensitive, and she still does. I sort of took that on board, though, to sort of be a bit more of a gatekeeper.
How old is your daughter?
She's almost 13.
When it began?
When it began, she was 2.5.
No.
So she had things like scratches on her back, and, you know, it was all really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So I had to face my fear, and I went through a process of doing spiritual releasement. Now, I just don't know how you feel about that. Is there any validity to helping these whoever go up to whatever level of the astral plane? Or
There is huge validity in doing it, particularly if you know what to do. It's fantastic for them. A lot of people on Earth are severely impacted by spirits who have passed, and particularly our children, because our children are the most sensitive mediumistically to the whole process. And so there's a huge benefit that you can have in helping spirits and also your children understand what's going on. And it's very sixth sensey, isn't it, what's happened to your daughter, in the sense of, like the movie The Sixth Sense. Yep.
And she watched that movie. I thought, oh, this will be a great opportunity for her recently to see that other people have experienced that. It was the most horrific thing I could have done. So.
And I want to explain why for you, so let's have a look at what's going on. So here's you firstly. There's Mum. Now, our children's law of attraction as they grow up is very much based upon our own law of attraction as parents. So actually, our children, when they're very young, are very much in the... If you could think of your law of attraction like a great big energy field around you, right, that also surrounds your child no matter where they are. They can be in the opposite side of the world and still be surrounded by this same energy that you have. And it's your own law of attraction that attracts things to your children. Now, your child obviously is quite open, and one reason why the child is quite open is because the more we deal with emotional blockages towards spirits, the more open our children become to seeing, hearing and experiencing those spirits on a day-to-day basis. The problem is that many of the spirits that surround us at any one point in time are spirits that are not necessarily malevolent, but they are just the same character they were basically when they were on the earth, which sometimes is malevolent and sometimes benevolent and sometimes a lot in between, addictive and so forth. And those people have passed, often in high states of confusion. And many of them don't want to move on into the spirit world. Many of them feel very attracted to come back to Earth and influence people on Earth as a result. Now these spirits, of which there are literally billions of them, by the way, that are on the Earth at the moment, surrounding the Earth and on the Earth. And these spirits, of course, are more highly attracted to a person who can hear them or see them clearly than they are to a person who cannot. So, naturally, they're going to be more attracted to our children than even to ourselves, no matter how mediumistic we personally are. Now, the problem with that, obviously, is that many of these spirits are in quite dark conditions. So while I've drawn them looking like the average person, assuming the average person is a stick figure, they actually can be quite ugly in appearance and full of deformations in their bodies, very much similar to how the Sixth Sense movie portrayed many of those spirits. Many of them also have a deep knowledge of how they died and therefore feel they are still in the same condition as their own death. So if they died from some kind of poisoning, often there'll be froth coming out of their mouth and out of their and blood coming out of their eye sockets and all that. So this is what they personally, as spirits, believe themselves to be still after they've passed. So they're just very much in this terrified state. So for the majority of them, they're just in terror. That's their dominant emotion. Now, because they're in terror, and if I have emotions of fear associated with spirits, spirit connection, people who are, who have got all sorts of things going on for them emotionally, my openness as a parent to that emotion allows my child then to be easily connected to, and particularly if my child can easily see, then she can easily connect to, or he can easily connect to those spirits. Now, every one of these spirits is very rare for lots and lots of spirits in that place who are earthbound to be in a real shocking condition in the sense of really malevolent. But the majority of them are in this sort of limbo, terrified condition where they have no idea why they are where they are. They've never learnt anything about the spirit world while they're on earth. They don't know how to progress in the spirit world. They don't know the truth of their progression. They don't know about morals, beliefs and other things that influence their progression. And they arrive totally clueless about their new environment. And instead of remaining in that environment, what they want to do instead is reconnect to an environment they understand, which most of us would probably want to do, let's face it, in that condition. So what they do is they come back down to the earth, although they see the earth in a very different way than what they did when they passed. Before they passed, they still want to come down to the earth. So they see the earth as a very dark, misty sort of a place, where they are often in a lot of confusion, and therefore quite personally terrified. And also, with most people, what do with their terror? They deny their terror with anger. So they're also often quite angry. Does that make sense? So over the top of their terror often is anger and rage. So the poor child, your child in this case, sees these spirits, feels their influence, and feels the anger and terror in these people, and is able to feel it through the unhealed emotion inside the parents. Both parents, by the way, not just one. So the way to address it is manifold. The first way is to begin addressing your own emotions about spirits and the interaction with spirits. And as adults, we often intellectualise our own fears and terrors so much that we believe we don't have them when actually we have them quite strongly. So we've got to be very honest with ourselves about the process as an adult. So the way to do that is to notice the response of the child and then notice your own emotional response to the child's emotion. And there's the emotion. You can grab hold of the emotion quite quickly then, and you can feel it, and you can process that emotion by releasing it, by fully experiencing it, rather than just going into some kind of management situation. So that's number one. Number one, focus on mum and dad's own emotion. The second thing is focus on educating the child about what these spirits are all doing. So you see that ugly, talk to them about the ugly one that's over there and the one that's got blood coming out of them over here, and be open and honest with them about that. And at a very young age, they'll cope with that if you're feeling safe. When you're feeling terrified, they will not cope with it. So make sure first you deal with your own terror and fear about that before you start talking about it with your child. Your child will take on your emotional response. So if you're terrified about it, your child is going to become terrified about it. Right? So you can say, you don't need to be afraid, you don't need to be... And all the while inside of you going, and what the child's feeling is, not the words entering their ear, right? So what we need to do is allow ourselves firstly to deal with our own terror and fear about it. And then secondly, now we start to educate the child about the spirit world and what's going on. And it's a fascinating process for the child and for yourself if you allow yourself to do that with firstly dealing with your own fear and terror. Now, if you refuse to deal with your own fear and terror, you will actually start suppressing a lot of the child's emotions, which actually creates damage in the child, even if you're telling the truth about the spirit world. The key is to feel all of your own emotions and fears and terrors. And as you do that, when you speak with your child will no longer feel terror from you on the subject. Now, if I can illustrate this with a totally different subject. If you're talking about spiders with your child, right, and you are absolutely terrified of spiders, right, your child is going to have a completely different emotional response than if you have no terror whatsoever about spiders. So when you get out a spider book to show the child, which as a parent, if you're terrified of spiders, you might not do very often, right? But you get out the book and you start talking about the different spiders with the child, right? The child is not the child, when it sees an image, it feels your emotional response to that image. And that emotional response, if they're open, enters them. Does that make sense? And so what's happening is I've got an emotion, and so let's say I'm a parent who wants to help my child not be afraid of spiders, but I myself am afraid of spiders. And I'm showing them pictures of spiders to help them not be afraid of spiders, and yet every time I look at a spider I have an emotion of fear. What's my child going to do? Can you see? It's going to feel my fear. Oh, Mummy's afraid, Mummy's afraid. And why is she afraid? And get into this place of questioning why she's afraid and what's going on. And that questioning and fear will enter that child in that state. So while I'm trying to educate it to be okay with spiders, it's feeling fear, my fear about spiders. So I'm actually doing the opposite of what I believe I'm doing. And it's exactly the same with dealing with spirits. Exactly the same process. If I'm afraid of spirits and I'm talking to the child about what they see and I'm feeling fear every time they describe something, then it's going to be very hard for that child to actually not feel fear when it looks at that particular spirit. The key is that every one of these spirits believe their bodies to be in the condition they're currently in, but their body does not need to be in that condition. So while they may have foam coming out of their mouth and blood coming out of their eyes if they died from poisoning, right? The truth is that there is no longer foam coming out of their mouth and and blood coming out of their eyes. It's just because they still believe themselves to be poisoned that that's happening. And if I explain to the child, actually, that's the image the person believes about themselves, right? And I can start working with that. See, and often I talk to children and say, well, all you do is see the person behind that image. And when the child does that, the child themselves who's alive does that, sees the person behind the image that the person's projecting at them, now they start to see the real person. And the real person is often just scared, frightened, very, very afraid, doesn't know what to do, and all they need is some help. So the most loving response would be to come up, give them a hug, sit them down next to me, and talk to them about the truth. So you could first do that with your child, with that spirit. So the child then just says, oh, Mummy, he's saying da-da-da-da. He's saying he doesn't know what to do. And then you, if you know about the spirit world, can say, well, what he needs to do is firstly allow his emotions to be present. You learn that. Or, there's also brighter spirits around him who can help him. Can I show a few of those brighter spirits to him? And those brighter spirits show themselves and he gets even more frightened. Mummy, he's really frightened now, And you say, well, he doesn't need to be frightened. And, you talk through the entire process with the child. And the beauty is that when that child grows up to be a little older, that child will be able to do that entire process itself. So that child will be able to do that process itself. And the beauty of that is that many, many spirits will be able to be helped in the process and be released from the earth and be able to progress in the spirit world as a result. And the problem is that many people on earth start viewing that as a crazy situation. They have judgment for the mental instability of the child. They have judgment of your mental instability as a parent, allowing it to continue. And, when we get into that place, as you know, it's a very, very damaging place for everyone to be in. So that's my suggestion, is just to do it in a very natural, loving way with them. So if you can bear in mind that these spirits, most of the time, are in a very, confused, they're terrified, sometimes quite angry, but it's all just bluster, a lot of it, because at the end of the day, they're just really terrified people who don't know what to do. And if we can help them to do what we can, a lot of progression happens as a result. Yeah. So, yes, I do agree totally with the idea of helping spirits. You'll notice actually on the website I'm posting quite regularly now sessions where I'm helping spirits, and that'll give anybody who is interested in doing that an idea of how you can help spirits progress in the spirit world. And there's under contemporary messages on the website. The website's, for those of you who don't know, it's www.divinetruth.com, and if you look under contemporary messages, there's people there who I'm doing a bit of this kind of work with. Almost every second Sunday, a group, just one or two of us get together and we help a group. And I'm posting those on the net because it'll give people an idea of how to help those spirits to get out of their condition. But as a parent, it's really important to deal with the emotion that's affecting the child's openness. Right? It's great for the child to remain open. It's not a bad place for them to be, but it's not very good if I'm full of fear about it, because that creates a huge amount of fear and terror in the child. So the child will wake up having nightmares, and as you've experienced, right? The child wakes up having nightmares and terrible experiences and describes grotesque creatures to you, and and then as a result of my own fear gets bigger again, and all I need to do as a parent is feel my own fear, and my child will then get into a state of calmness in dealing with those ones. And that, if you think about it, I love the Sixth Sense movie for that reason, is that the child eventually got to the point where he understood what was going on, that they were all just spirits who had died and didn't know what to do. And remember the girl in the end that he helped to progress, and he also got some truth and told the truth to the parents. And remember her father, I think it was her mother, had murdered her, and that's what she wanted to tell, And this is the thing too, is that many of these spirits do have a lot of unresolved business here on earth. A lot of it is not very necessary business, but they feel it's unresolved. Yeah. So sometimes it's just, money went to the wrong person or something like that. But a lot of these spirits are there around the earth. And the more we can help progress, the lighter the earth becomes as a result.